Thank you very much, above all, for those who stayed from the last session. We're really excited about doing the ethical side of AI now. We have a great panel for you, and we're going to touch upon subjects like liability and trust and the ethical design, effectively, but interestingly as well, things like consciousness. So one of the things that we wanted to do before we start is really prep you for the conversation. And so I have the pleasure to introduce you to Tony Fish, who's going to go through a few concepts to make sure that you're all very well equipped for the conversation we're going to have next. Thank you.
I'm going to sit down rather than stand, and the reason I'm going to sit down is it's more of a conversation. And the reason it needs to be a conversation is, as Richard Feynman says, that once you can teach something, you probably understand it. I lecture in AI, and the reason I lecture and not teach is I don't understand it. But we've got 2 minutes to try and explain what some of the aspects of AI. Up there, you'll see rule-based. So the first thing we look at is rule-based decision-making, where we give you yes-no data. And out of yes-no data, you can make a decision. And some of those decisions could be very simple modeling of patterns. From rule-based learning, we move to statistical analysis. And statistical analysis is where we put numerical numbers into a database and then into an algorithm. And we can do predictive modeling from that. The next level up from that is this idea of machine learning, which we've heard an awful lot about. And machine learning is where you take arbitrary data, and what you do is you abstract it to a number, because it has to be a number. And from that, you can then do an analysis. And that analysis allows the identification of features. And that's what machine learning is about, arbitrary data. Then we hit this last block at the end, which everyone talks about as artificial intelligence. And basically, at this point, you're now selecting a particular method to work out what's happening. And from that, you can present information. But you've got to have arbitrary data and the selection of a method. And this is why autonomous vehicles don't use one algorithm. They use all of the ones above and many more. So an AI, as we move on, under it is this idea of deep learning. And deep learning is this last sort of piece behind me. And the purpose of deep learning is it has an input and an output. And at the level 1, what we do is we look very, very simply for the edges. And after we've looked for the edges of an image, we look for corners. And after corners, we look for distinctive patterns. And out of that, we can work out something. And you have to go through deep learning, which is a number of algorithms which work on top of each other. So deep learning is the foundation of machine learning. Machine learning allows us to reach artificial intelligence. But it's not one algorithm. The reason for the pattern on the left is that is Alexa. And Alexa is an AI-type system. And if you look at just the deep learning algorithm, it's one tiny little part of AI in an entire system. And in Alexa, we actually use all of these parts as well. So AI is not an AI. It is not an algorithm. It is a system. And hopefully when we talk about the ethics, what we're going to hear about is systems from everybody. Hopefully that'll give you a context of some of the words we're going to use. Diana.
Thank you very much, Tony. And now, please help me to welcome the rest of our panel. So we have the wonderful Clara Durodie joining us, and Richard Harris. Wonderful. So just to give you a bit of context, we're going to introduce ourselves and tell you a bit more as to why we're so interested in the topic. So like I was mentioning in the previous session, we are doing as a company at SUADE a lot of things that are really enabling our clients to do a lot of machine learning. Recently, we were named by the World Economic Forum as Tech Pioneers. And with that kind of work, we've been actually looking at a lot of the context around the fourth industrial revolution and asking ourselves, really, as a tech company, what is really our responsibility when it comes to the ethics of what we're bringing to the industry. So that's for me as to why I'm passionate about the subject, and I'm very excited to have this wonderful panel. We did preps yesterday, and it's going to be fantastic, I can guarantee it. So I'll hand over to you, Tony, to tell us why you're passionate about AI and ethics.
Why I'm passionate about AI and ethics is because we don't debate it enough. We have a veneer in society, and as a veneer, we like to pretend we understand who we are. We like to pretend we have free will, and we don't. We like to pretend we understand understand trust. We don't. We like to pretend we understand privacy. We don't. We're trying to get into a world where actually you're going to be profiled. And what we need to discuss is actually what that means for you, for me, and for society. So what I'm interested in is actually having public debates about not just the implications, but actually what it means for us understanding ourselves and society wider.
Thank you.
Okay, 2 words about me. I am the chair of Cognitive Finance Group. We are an advisory business. We work with board of directors and executives in financial services to help them make sense of artificial intelligence in the most real way, in the most practical way. We also have some work in the space of VC, investments in AI companies. Most of my time is spent with executives. Most of my time is spent with talking to them about no-nonsense conversation, trying to make very complicated things around applications of AI within the business setting as simple as possible. The reason for which I'm interested in ethics in AI in financial services is twofold. One is because I believe that we are rushing with this technology in a space where we don't have a structural philosophical approach as to what we're going to do with this technology. Second point is that I believe that this technology will truly enable us to build to redefine trust in our industry. Trust is one of the core values in our industry. So I believe that as long as we deploy this technology responsibly, we will be able to redefine trust. And that's why ethics in AI, in financial services, it's so important to me.
Hi, Richard Harris. I head up Feedzai's business outside of North America. Why do I care about ethics in AI? Well, Feedzai is now working with probably some of the world's biggest financial services firms. We process billions of dollars a day looking at fraud, risk, and financial crime. Why do we care about ethics? Because our clients do. Our clients care about how they're handling their customers' data. They have to solve those challenges. So it's incumbent upon us in the industry to lead the way and show our clients that this can be done in a responsible way, that people's data can be handled successfully, that they can be profiled, that data can be used, but at the same time, that data isn't abused in any way, that the trust is there in the system. If we don't do that, no one else is going to.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. So we're going to start a bit with setting the tone, I guess, the scene around the panic and the fear, really, that AI is putting out there. And I wanted to start with you, Clara, because I know that you feel quite passionate about how people are, need to be demystified around it and how scared they are around what can AI do for the industry.
So my background is asset and wealth management. I'm trained as a fund manager, and I pivoted out of financial services at the end of 2014. And I did that with a view to spend about 4 months studying trust. That's all I wanted to study. And I had the luxury to say no to corporate life. I spent time looking at what trust means to humans and how we build it, how we reinforce it. And in the process, I found a lot of things about trust, but I found about the 2 main drivers which move us, irrespective of religion, background, gender, you name it. There are 2 main forces. One is fear, and the other one is love. Love, like loving your family, like loving the job you do, like loving your hobbies. But fear is something which creates a lot of negative sentiments which can drive us to do things. And I believe, the reason for which I mentioned this to drivers is I believe that our industry has been subjected to fear-mongering far too long. That's one reason the fear has penetrated into this profession's psyche when it comes to AI. The second reason, I believe that fear has been generated in the face of the unknown. As executives, I used to be an executive, very busy to keep the lights on and to do my emails and answer and do the paperwork I needed to do. You don't have time to think about the future, research what AI is, learn all of these complicated things. And when you're faced with the unknown, and everybody's telling you, you got to be disrupted, you got to be doing this, innovate, do the other one. People turn inwards. There's fear. Fear paralyzes us. So I strongly believe that the fear-mongering around the adoption of AI has been vastly exaggerated. And that fear is going to go away when people will truly understand what this technology is and how it will improve business and day-to-day work in which they do.
And Richard, for example, in the work that you do with your customers, do you find that when you're trying to explain AI, do they welcome it? Do they feel that fear, that panic about using it?
I don't think so. I think we've reached a point in the industry now where machine learning is effectively table stakes for most clients that we work with. So, it's a given that this is going to be part of what they're going to use in their toolbox. It's more a case of, how do you do it and how do you do it responsibly? And I think, yes, there is some fear mongering, but it's, I'm a child of the internet revolution, I guess. I spent my days writing, intranets for companies when they put lists of phone numbers on them and things like that because they wanted to have a website back in the mid-90s. I'm still wearing a black T-shirt and I'm still wearing jeans, and we're doing the same thing all over again with AI. I mean, it's 20 years ago it was the internet's going to change everything, but we don't know how. If you go back to 1995 and ask people how it was going to change everything, they tell you everything wrong. We're in exactly the same place now with AI, except it's going to happen at twice the speed. So I think the pace of change is ever increasing. Moore's law, et cetera, drives all of this. That's not going away. So I think if you go back to the same fear-mongering 20 years ago, the internet's going to take away jobs, the internet's going to make everything impossible, it's going to become a surveillance state. Yeah. Well, all of those things are being said about AI. You can pretty much repeat all of those challenges and replace the word internet with artificial intelligence, and nothing has changed. There'll be another technology in 20 years' time that does the same thing. So we have the same responsibilities and the same approaches. But again, technology used well by humans thinking about things the right way can be used responsibly and work well. We all carry the phones in our pockets now. We're connected to the internet. We don't think of working any other way. AI is going to be like that, but not in 15 years' time, but probably in 3 or 5.
That's brilliant. And so one of the things that we all agree on, we were saying that there are obviously some dangers when it comes to AI, and so this is the whole concept around the ethics conversation. And so I know that, Richard, we were discussing the data piece, right? And so how much bias can actually be generated if it's not managed correctly. Do you want to share a bit your thoughts around that when it comes to data and how it can fundamentally corrupt the way that machines are looking at morals and our society?
Yeah, so I think there's a very good example. If you whiz on to TED Talks and you put in a search about facial recognition, it'll produce a number of videos, and there's a black lady who does one particular video, Josie, and what it says is she is a coder, she writes an algorithm for recognizing faces, she buys a data set, she uploads the data set, and her algorithm fails, and then she suddenly realizes that the data set that she's been given, which is a generic data set, actually has no black faces. And therefore, there's a corruption within the data which causes us problems. So we know there's data biases. We know there's algorithmic biases where people have an interpretation about the way an algorithm will work and will code it differently. We know, therefore, data bias. We know algorithmic bias. We know that there's, therefore, an interpretation bias as well. When you see results, individuals interpret data differently the way it's presented. Those biases we don't talk about, because if we like the output, we run away with it. If we don't like the output, we raise our hands. And at the moment, we haven't got enough of either to properly have the debate. But yes, data bias is an issue that's going to keep raising its head.
And so, for example, Richard, in your company, the data that you look at, so how do you prevent this data bias to happen?
So I think one of the key things that we always look at is, what there is a complete lack of in the industry is explainability in a lot of places. It's very simple to go and build a model. We had someone come to us for a job in marketing in San Francisco at Feedzai the other week. They'd built a fully working machine learning model by downloading a Python kit in 2 weeks. Yeah. They had no coding experience. You can do this from scratch if you're smart and educated. This is not hard to build models. What is hard is to understand why is the model doing what it's doing and be able to trace that back to a source. So one of the areas that we've pioneered very strongly in Feedzai is you can only understand bias in your data set and in your algorithmic approach if you can see the output from the algorithm and see why it's doing what it's doing. So having clear explainability allows you to do three things. One is to audit what's going on and understand why it's happening. Two, to explain why it's happening. And three, more importantly, if you can do both of those things, then you can learn to actually trust the algorithm and know it's doing what it's doing. In financial services, that's fundamental, because if you're going to deny somebody credit or if you're going to block something for money laundering, you can't do it because the computer says no.
Yeah.
You've got to do it because you've got a clear set of data backing that up with an audit trail that says why you're doing it. And you're only going to put a model into production if you've got a clear governance process that shows that you can put that into production with a conscious understanding that, you know, this isn't garbage in, garbage out, because that's what it comes back to.
Yeah.
If your data's crap, then you're going to get crap out the system.
Indeed. And I guess, so Clara, one of the questions for you, because I know you studied this and you know quite a lot about the topic. So if you had to prioritize between good data and a complex algorithm, how would you look at it? What would you decide?
Well, you always have to start from the root of the problems. And here I'd like to quote Gela Bošković, who completely said it, that the only policy which would protect us against, our insurance policy to protect us against biases, is to have a diverse team, not only at the point of curating the data, as the previous speaker mentioned earlier, but also to monitoring how the data is being used and how the algorithm has been built. So when it comes to, I'd like to reinforce the fact that diversity of teams, it's one sure way to make sure that this bias is reduced, monitored, and eventually removed.
And you had a brilliant example that we were discussing a bit earlier about what bias of data can actually do to someone's career if you don't actually have the opportunity to question it.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to share this with you because I don't have a non-disclosure agreement with my son. So this is what we were discussing over lunch. Usually in my presentations, in my keynotes, I have a slide which starts, imagine this young man, tall, 6'3", carrying, he's a rower, and big smile on his face, blonde hair. And I start saying, look, he's applied for internship in 2019 at investment banks in London. He went to Eton College. He's in Oxford studying. He's one of the most liked and sociable people in his year, raised money from charities, engages with grown-ups, and so on and so forth. So very sociable guy. So he was interviewed by an algorithm provided by this very large global bank. I'm not going to mention the name because that's not the point. So he was asked to do a test online, and then he passed that test, and then he was invited for an interview. And I went to him and said, like, wow, well done, an interview. He said, like, no, don't get excited, it's an interview with an algorithm. So he failed the interview with the algorithm because guess why? The algorithm, for some reasons, came to the conclusion that he doesn't have social skills. And here's the problem. The problem is that, not that we disagree with the algorithm, the problem is there was no way, absolutely no way, where he could appeal that decision, engage with a human, say, hello, you investment bankers, can you just tell me a little bit more? I'm one of the most sociable people that you can imagine. Why is that your algorithm has come up to this conclusion? Because obviously it is wrong. That is a case of an algorithm which got it wrong. How do we fix that? That is how trust is broken down. That is how that particular bank has lost a good potential employee. That's how that same bank won't have applications from another 10 Oxford graduates who wanted to apply, because when they heard the experience he went through, his mate said, like, forget it, we're not going to do this, it's a waste of time. So it's a real life example, and we have to take this seriously. This is how we can build trust or destroy trust.
And actually, another very large bank said that he was an exceptional candidate, just to teach you how the machine can be wrong in one bank, and in another bank say that he's absolutely exceptional.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
important to remember. So then we have a responsibility to the data that we actually feed to the machines, and to really talk about artificial intelligence. One of the things that we get asked a lot as well when it comes to vendors and software and all of that is really the liability, right? So customers very often ask, so who is liable then? Because we speak about having parents, the parents of the machine.
Well,
and
algorithms
so
have
who is
parents.
responsible?
Yeah, I think algorithms. Well, let's just simplify the discussion. Algorithms have parents, and we are responsible at a point of building them, but we are equally responsible at a point of deploying them and maintaining them. So it's not a case of like, we build these machines, we're going to let them go, and they're going to do their own thing. So I'm of the opinion that our responsibilities go across the entire range.
Go ahead, Tony.
Please.
Yeah, algorithms have parents, okay? AI
And
does not,
grandparents.
okay? Because AI is something that takes a pile of data and will self-learn, okay? Yes, like you as a child, your parent had to tell you a cat was a cat, but you learned over a period of time. So we tell we're involved in the process of it learning, but once it is learned, it self-learns, and it self-learns faster. So it doesn't have, in this classic sense, an algorithm. It is not an algorithm. It is an AI, and an AI is a system, and an AI is a system of many components. And it's the many components of interaction, and there is no allocation of something being wrong. Computers are never wrong, okay? The way it might be analyzing data can be wrong, but you cannot mistrust something because it is only doing exactly what you asked. When we do hit AI, okay, it is going to do something
No.
which actually we don't understand.
Are we going to disagree now?
We're starting with that already. Go for it.
We're going to massively disagree on that.
So we are just like a very alive panel here. So I hope you just like you can see that. So go ahead.
Go on then. Okay, so
And so just to also bring it back to the question, right? So
Yeah.
we're going to the whole AI dimension. If I'm someone at the board of a financial institution and I'm deciding whether I should be buying, AI-driven technology or not, I will be asking, so who is responsible? If there's something that happens that goes wrong, am I the one that's supposed to be responsible, or the person that's selling me the software, or the person that built the software?
It's just you're not buying AI technology. Okay, AI is a system. You're buying an entirety of a system, not a piece of technology. Okay, so yes, but so you don't buy AI technology.
But I still don't know who's liable. I wanna know.
So I'll slightly buy that from Tony, that it's a system. So if you're talking about the system as a whole, then obviously whoever's building, training, testing, deploying, auditing, going through a compliance process, model governance, and then putting it in production holds the liability, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who've done that. And typically, that isn't going to be a software vendor, says the software vendor. But it's pretty obvious because we've been doing this for years with rules. Machine learning, AI, rules, they're all systems for making decisions. It's just decisioning software, that's what it is. And the people who deploy that decisioning software and come up with a decisioning strategy are the ones who are going to carry the can with the responsibility. That's the result, because that is the strategy that's been implemented. It is a tool. That's what it is. Now, what you need to do is work with vendors who make it easy to understand why the tool is doing what it's doing. And this is why it comes back to explainability every single time. If you're working with, as Tony's talking about, if you're actually going with deep learning and then going to deploy that into an operational environment with no explainability, you're going to have a real trouble with the regulator in some areas. Maybe you can do that in a fraud environment because you don't really have to explain yourself to a regulator that much in a fraud environment, maybe. If you're going to try and do that in AML or, God forbid, in credit risk, you're not going to get away with it. It's not going to happen. The standards that you're held to just aren't going to play with a model that's a black box. You've got to have a white box solution.
Yeah.
So there are different ways that you can get around that. So it's not to say that those algorithms are impossible. Now, we're pioneering two different approaches. So one of them is that you can use humans to interpret the deep learning to say, why is it doing what it's doing? That's a certain one. It's a divining type process, potentially in some cases, because it is kind of hard. Now, there are other approaches out there, some of which we're working on, using machine learning and deep learning to understand the deep learning. So you effectively come along and you apply another algorithm to understand why the deep learning algorithm is doing what it's doing. That is a viable approach to use. So, and that's being used in industry by a few players. So That's a possible approach, but frankly, most of the time when you're going to deploy machine learning and AI into this kind of financial services environment, you're going to be working with true machine learning algorithms. You're going to be working with random forests, XGBoost, those kind of tree-based algorithms. You can audit those back to a point, and you can follow the decision tree process, and you can come up with a very clear, rational, statistically based answer for why the algorithm did what it did. And at the end of the day, it's statistics. If you're going to do that, then you're standing in front of a regulator with a very solid base, and you've got a very clear, natural language explanation for why it's done what it's done. And that seems to me probably for 99% of the problems that we have in financial services, one of the best approaches. They're also a damn sight quicker to train, which makes a big difference.
So I guess
can I make a point?
Yeah, of course.
Which is,
I think...
1 second, which is, so if I take a data set and I put it into a deep learning or I put it into an AI system, I get a result because the machine has learned. Okay, if I take the same data set and I reorder the data, I get different learning. And it's really important. You can have the same data set, and the way the machine learns is based on the actual data. So the more data you put in and the order you put it in depends on the actual learning and therefore the way it will behave. So the unpackingness of an algorithm decision-making is absolutely true. But when you hit AI, it is not true. Because it is like you. You are, the experiences you have compared to the person sitting next to you, you may have had the same experiences but in a different order. So you actually think differently. And you've got to think these systems are going to think differently. And that's a really important aspect. If you had the same algorithm, okay, which is you were brought up as twins, we even know twins think differently. And they have the same data and same experiences. So we've got to think much more about this system being a system and human, not just a very simple, logical process we can unpack.
Okay, I'd like to just summarize one point for you to take away at a point when you go back to your desks in the office. One thing I'd like you to take away is the importance of, at a point of selection of AI vendors or building systems or whatever your company decides to do, the explainability of your systems, it's one of the key control measures if you want to implement right from the beginning. So one of the hard questions to ask at a point of procuring systems is to ask, how can you explain what your algorithm is doing, what your product is doing? Why? Because it's very important to see what you're up to from the beginning, but also it's very expensive when you have to roll back and start all over again when the regulator comes in and asks you to explain some of the stuff you've done. It's important to look at the vendor landscape. And I'm glad that Feedzai is here with us today because in my personal, completely independent view, I think they are one of the leaders in this space who are taking explainability very seriously. So do ask the hard questions when you purchase AI from vendors and ask them, how can they secure explainability?
And actually, I mean, just one of the things that you were mentioning yesterday as well was the reality of version control and those kind of things.
Yes.
So
it's here's one thing in saying chemistry. Scientists have a version control for every experiment they run. They mix A plus B, that comes out to C. They mixed A plus D, that comes out to other outcome. Every time they do each experiment, they keep a version control. They keep track of what they've done. And I think it's quite important that computer scientists have some sort of version control in that way, whether it's through another algorithm which is explainable or through other forms of recording that kind of control. Do not be afraid. Do ask these questions at a point of procuring your systems.
That's brilliant. And did you want to add on that?
I'm going to give an alternative view, which is in the world where the regulator is standing there saying, what you've got to do is do this explainability. Okay, we're in a world of approval. Okay, so you've always got to get approval from somebody to go and do it. The reality is we sit here as a human race because of something else that came through. And most of the drugs we take came from forgiveness. Okay, people went and did things, turned around, found they were very successful and asked for, basically, forgive me. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but sometimes kids come and ask for approval, you say no, then they come back when they've done it and you ask for forgiveness. Okay, we do it in front of everybody. And as an industry, we've got two choices, and both of them are completely valid. One is this: go and get your repeatability, get your explainability, make sure you're doing this, and you might end up doing something. I'm of a different world. I want to ask for forgiveness, and I want to go off and innovate. And I'm not interested about making mistakes. I'm going to learn from my mistakes. I'm going to learn really, really quickly. Because actually, I don't know what the output is, and I don't know what the implication is, but I want to get there really fast.
But Tony, that's the reason why you take your ideas and run them on the edge of the business. What we're talking here is adoption of AI, where the regulator is looking at the outcomes of your work. And you can't ask the regulator for forgiveness. I'm sorry. I've been in situations where the regulator came in and you had to put all out there. You know, the regulator is not going to take forgiveness.
I think that, you know, when it comes to liability, and because we do a lot of regulatory work and we're a reg tech company, I will have to echo and give the win to Clara on that one, because there is a reality that, you know, the buyer is going to remain responsible from everything we're seeing, and the more transparency you have, the better it's going to be for. Yeah.
So,
if you get
but the innovation
by the
at edge, I agree with you. You innovate, you have to have that freedom to innovate without, you know, being penalized. But that's why companies like Goldman Sachs, they do it on the edge. They build stuff independent from their main business.
And so
I'm going to argue because, and the reason I want to present a different view.
About trust now.
No, it's a different view is, what's really interesting is in Singapore, where they've created a different regulatory environment already, where they've got a regulator to defend the users and a regulator to defend the corporates.
Yeah.
Okay, they're already taking a very different approach. While regulators remain in certain markets doing this, they may actually hold back countries. And regulators are starting to look around going, do you know what, we're going to hold back industries by retaining that model. Other countries may accelerate faster by changing their regulatory policy. So I'm not so sure there's such a clear-cut pattern.
There is a reason, right, that all of this regulation is coming in, which is because of the financial crisis. And so obviously since then, we've had a lot of trouble building trust in the industry. And so one of the things we were discussing as well was that there is obviously a huge opportunity when it comes to AI to rebuild trust in the industry, so to use that as a way to rebuild trust. And so, so what are your thoughts on that, Tony?
Thoughts on trust. One of the things as a society, we've got to work out, and when you go for beers afterwards, here's a couple of, you know, just a thought experiment. So what type of AI world do you want which you're going to trust? So what the AI is doing, because it learns from images, it's looking through the images that are coming back from your phones, and it looks around, and a lot of people happen to be in Africa at the moment, and what it starts to learn is actually there's a drought. Okay, so it can see there's a drought. So does the AI turn around to local governments around the world and say, there's a drought in this country, we can see the drought, and actually, therefore, we should divert resources to solve the drought? Okay, that's one scenario. Second scenario is it looks at the world global patterns of climate change, and it recognizes in certain countries next year there will be a drought. And therefore, should it divert resources today to try and actually alleviate the drought before it occurs? At what point do you want these systems to intervene or alert you to these changes? Now, there's lots of different models, and the one thing we haven't had as a discussion around society is what model we want, and it depends on your model of trust. If we believe trust even exists, or it's just a way that we communicate an economic manipulation. And we've got to start breaking down the words to what we mean to society, not what it means to a business.
And I mean, Clara, I know that you feel quite passionate about how it could actually bring a lot of value, for example, for the, you know, the wealth industry. So everything that is kind of asset management and that kind of space. It's
okay. On the point of trust, and I'm going to, for a moment, go back on your discussion around forgiveness. Okay. When you run, let's take the discussion when you run a credit decisioning system on Joe Blog, and your algorithm decide that he's no good, okay? And you reject it, okay? So what happens to that poor soul? His credit rating goes a little bit 2 layers down. The next time when he applies for a loan, the interest rate is going to be quite high up, so he's going to pay more money. Now go to Joe Blog and tell him, forgive me, I'm sorry, I've messed up your credit rating and you're paying £300 more every month because whatever. This is how you destroy trust. And this is our instances like in life. Sometimes sorry is not good enough, okay? How many times people did to you things when as many times they would say sorry, 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 would not cut it. So, trust is a way in which we build relationships with each other. Trust is the core of our industry. We manage other people's money. People have an emotional relationship with their money. We are in an industry where we cannot afford this kind of, forgive me, I messed it up, whatever. Trust, it's absolute the core. It's not a hyperbolic, esoteric concept in our industry. Trust is very tangible in our industry. Clients stay with us, or clients don't stay with us.
I mean, I guess the conversation is around, if you think about trust and AI, and effectively why AI can help us rebuild that trust.
Well, we rebuild trust when we are capable to deliver on a consistent basis, reliable, transparent, and competent service to our clients.
Yeah.
Can I take it one stage further? Okay, which is
And competent.
I'm now going to be Joe Blogs, okay, and because Joe's very poor, and actually I have no disposable income, and Diana here, she's immensely wealthy, okay, and she has lots of wealth. What these systems are now doing is Diana now gets a free mobile phone because it's a channel to advertise to her and offer her all these financial services. She gets free TV, free everything, because she's got lots of money, which is going to be spent, and the advertisers want to reach her to allow access to that disposable income. Poor Tony, he ain't got flipping two halfpennies to rub together, because all I do is lecture and I upset people. So nobody pays me anything. Oh dear. Okay, I have to now go and buy my mobile phone. I have to go and buy my TV service. I have to buy my own shoes and my own clothes, because I don't get anything. So as society, we're taking this data and we're making the poor, me, poorer. We're making the rich, richer. So in your scenario, it's not about credit rating. We're actually generating data about people, and that data is actually going to start to influence the way we, society, behave. So much more, as a society, do we want that future where, because of your data, you're going to get benefits, and you're going to enjoy those benefits because you're data rich?
So I'll take that on, because frankly, we already live in that society, Tony. That's the point. You're talking about marketing, and that's the difference. So yeah, I've got two boys, 4 and 6. I'm at home with them at the weekend in London, and they're on the iPad, and they cannot get off the iPad. They cannot get off YouTube. If any of you know the terror of Minecraft videos, you can watch a kid watching Minecraft videos for minute after minute after minute after minute. My wife said to me, why will they not put this down? When we were kids, we could turn the TV off and walk away. And I said to her, look, you've got one of the world's most powerful AIs behind YouTube that knows exactly what a 4-year-old boy wants to see, which is Stampy doing it again. And that's what he does. And that's what they get. They can't put it down. It is really, really strong. It is very, very powerful. And you can watch that at work in your living room on your sofa. You know, that is where we end up with Cambridge Analytica, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's why we have regulation in financial services. That's why we have the approach that we have in financial services, because we have a responsibility. We're not just marketing products to people off the back of free clicks. You know, I'm looking at it in Europe now. We launched GDPR earlier this year. What a great success that's been. What happens now, we ping up a website page that says, do you agree to take all my data? The answer is yes, because I want to read the article. What do? We all click yes. We've all given away all our data. The intention of GDPR was to give us choice. It's actually taken away our choice, because we just click yes to everything because we're fed up with this pop-up. So we've handed this data over from a marketing perspective. What we haven't done is do that in financial services, and I believe that as an industry we've made a smart choice there, because we do care about the data that goes in. We're not interested in just that myriad of just streaming random click data. We're interested in what do people really do with their money, and how do they actually behave, and what's important to them. And I think if we're doing this properly, then we'll get much higher quality insights, because I don't know about you, if I look at the inbox of my Google spam filter, it's full of absolute rubbish. I'm still getting the spam. Google is using AI to stop me seeing the spam, but it's still turning up depending on whatever my 4-year-olds are clicking on YouTube. So it's, that's the world that we live in. It's not something that's coming, it's there. The manipulation is there, but we have a choice as an industry to manage that properly. And I think the industries that haven't managed it properly are frankly paying the price in the public eye, and I don't think we as an industry want to do that.
I think, can I just add one point? I think with the advent of this technology, we are at a very unique point in the history of our industry. It's the very first time ever when in our industry we can deliver personalized, truly personalized service at scale to our clients. How many times in our industry have we been able to do that? Never. So the holy grail in financial services, which is services, with AI, I would submit to you that we can, through this personalization at scale, we can truly put services back into financial services because we are at the service of our clients. And we, in financial services, we work, I would argue, in an environment which is a little bit different to what the society is like. So the narrative around using this data and what we do with it in financial services, it's slightly different to the narrative which we have around how we use data at a societal level. So financial services, has this opportunity, unique opportunity to use AI to deliver personalized service at scale. It is unique. And when I say personalized, it's unique in our history. When I say at scale, it means that we can grow businesses and we can add on be more competitive, compete better across the planet, and serve our clients better.
So when you think about a world with better personalized financial services, so in particular with like wealth management, a lot of this could be done by robots. And the conversation here is, how do you feel, for example, around the people that would be displaced in terms of the advisory space when it comes to that?
Well, it's interesting because we work with wealth management, and I was having a discussion with a large wealth manager in Europe, and they said to me, we welcome this. As long as we, individual fund manager, we can train that system and put our knowledge into it, and the system can trade on our behalf, and we can go on holiday non-stop. So this is one interesting take, but on the point of job losses, I think we need to reconsider that and look through the optics of same people, new skills.
And so then whose responsibility is it to upskill the workforce, right? Because we were talking with Dr. Go before that it is in the short term a reality. And so that's a very important question. I think that when you provide in particular technologies to tech companies, we should be asking ourselves, whose responsibility is it to upskill our workforce?
It starts at the board level. You need to have an HR strategy. You need to have an HR strategy part of an AI strategy.
Richard,
I'm going to argue slightly
If you're not going to disagree with me, Tony, I would be surprised.
Yeah, the purpose of this is to debate and think. And if you go back to a macroeconomic level, okay, and this is slightly off the AI and ethics issue, which we need to come back to, but the reality is we're going through a change in the way that we work and how we work. And government, with regulation, likes to keep large corporates because it's a really easy way of collecting tax. What the new generations are coming through, and we've already seen it with Uber and everybody else, is everybody's moving to a service-based economy. You won't have a job for life. You'll probably have 3 jobs at the same time, and you will use skills. And we've got to get used to new skills. We've got to get used to a new way of thinking. The idea of the corporate owning responsibility for its employees, it goes back to individuals. Kids are already coming through with some of these philosophies, and they are already going down a path of not wanting to own assets. So we're seeing some seriously big global changes, and the kids are asking about the ethics. And they're looking on the door, and what they do is they look at the purpose of companies, and this is why AI and ethics comes into it, because what they want to see is this company doing things with my data or anybody's data that I don't like? I won't work for that company. And people are starting to make judgments, and I'd like to pick up on your issue of personalization, because personalization that you see today is based on a bunch of data of transaction. What really gets interesting is where you start to add your social data in, and your interactive data, and your group data. Because suddenly I don't understand if you're an A person who sits in a nice house, you're married with 2 kids, which is the old way of profiling. I see your propensity to spend money in certain situations. I see your ability to trust your friends or lend to your friends. I see your ideology about investment in the future or spending today. Those issues are how you emotionally behave. When we look at personalization in the future, I'm going to start to appeal to your emotions. Now, is that right? Should we use those nudged-based economics? What happens if I nudge you into the wrong thinking? Who owns the responsibility? And this is where the ethicals are not getting debated. We're not thinking, actually, this is a system, and I can manipulate you to do something because that's what the algorithm has been trained to do. Do you want to be in that world, or do you want to be influencing that world to make sure at least we have transparency? Sorry. Bit of a rant.
So employment and education, Richard.
I'm trying to work out what the question was.
The question was, what do we do with the workforce that's going to be redundant in the not too distant future?
I could have a long conversation with Tony, but I'll come back to the question.
No, there is the networking drinks afterwards. You're all welcome to come and argue with Tony.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Bring lots of beer. So, look, I think I go back to the statement I made at the very beginning. 20 years ago, we were going through exactly this process with the internet. We were all sitting there going, what are we going to do with all the people who aren't going to deliver letters anymore? Well, we still have a postal service. They just deliver everything from Amazon. So, it's...
Yes, but then should something be regulated to prevent the short-term hit that we're talking about?
Look, I'm no regulation expert when it comes to public policy, but I would say the reality of the profound nature of the change that's going to come means that any regulation that's done in a proactive way is likely to be well-intentioned but completely miss the mark, frankly. So we're going to have to ride it out like we ride everything out as a society, and you do it with the right intentions and the right understanding and the right approach in terms of making sure that people aren't left behind. But it's... we go through these changes on a relatively regular basis. We've been through it with the invention of computers in the early 80s, with the internet, now AI. It's these generational shifts keep coming. They're not going to stop. This isn't the last one. It's not if we fix this, it's going to be fine. There's going to be something else. So, I've sat here through the quantum computing sessions yesterday. We're 5 to 10 years away from that revolutionizing things again. So these are just waves of technology that we deal with as human beings. We've dealt with it ever since, cars replaced horses on the streets of London 100 years ago. It's, and previous to when somebody invented the wheel, it doesn't really make any difference. It's just more tech. So,
but it's also a lot more people that will be affected.
It is a lot more people, but you could argue that the internet was probably a more profound change in society, and mass communication with mobile phones has had probably a much bigger impact on society than AI will in the short term. It's, all of those things have changed the way that we work and that we approach life. So, it's just another one of those.
And so now we have a few minutes left that we wanted to have around the future.
I want to make one important point, forgive me, on what we're going to do. Are we going to all be unemployed or not? Earlier I said that there must be an HR strategy at the corporate level. But what I did not say then, and I'd like to emphasize now, it's your responsibility to remain relevant. Go online, take those courses, machine learning courses. Go be curious about this technology. I'm one of you, and I took time to learn all of this, to learn how to code. I understand the tech. I run conversations with engineers. So if I did it, you can do it. Don't wait for your corporates to make decisions for you, because they have their own agenda. Take your life in your own hands, your career.
And that's very important. I would like to echo that, because obviously, for example, with the World Economic Forum, we were in China recently, and maybe 80% of the topics were around the fourth industrial revolution, upskilling the workforce. What are we actually going to do with all of these people that in the short term are going to be affected? So definitely take matter into your own hands and get educated around that is quite important. So the last part of the panel we wanted to be discussing is really about what the future holds, right? And so the question here is how do we make sure that we bring back the human into the machine, right? So I'll start with you, Tony. What do you think are the important things to think about in the future to make sure that happens?
Okay, again, a model to talk about over beers. On one axis, we've got autonomy, okay, which is this axis. On this axis, we've got ethical sensitivity. So in the corner, down the bottom, you have no autonomy, you do nothing, you're stationary, and you have no moral sense, you have no ethical sense. Humanity wants to get to autonomous sensitivity. Basically, you have full moral autonomy. You're able to be one of us. You're part of society, and that's you've got to go in a path. When man first came to the earth, we kind of like went up on the autonomy, and we reached the autonomy scale with no ethics, so we started to kill people and everything else, and we reached full moral autonomy that way. And over time, we sort of came down and down and down. Now, we won't let our kids out until they're 11 or 12 or 7, until we've taught them the rights and wrongs. So we've taken them along the ethical sensitivity, then we give them freedom to become autonomous. Machines, we've already given them the autonomy. Okay? Now, as a society, we carry on saying, we're going to teach machines ethics. And the question we've got is, do we teach machines ethics? Or do the machines come down the same path we did, and they teach themselves their ethics? And so, as a society, we've got to go through a decision of the future if we want to tell machines what they're doing, or machines are going to learn themselves. Why the question? If we take our data and pop it into machines and let it learn from us, as a white middle-class male, hallelujah, I'm going to be really successful. All the data biases to me. Ladies, I'm sorry, you're probably going to lose out. And if you happen to be black or one of that, the reality is it's going to be really bad because the data sets are so biased. So if we take some of our data and put it into these systems, we're going to end up with the wrong outcomes. So we've got to go through a view of what our vision is of the future and how machines are going to learn.
So like a reactive, like a really reactionary approach to ethical, development of AI.
Yeah.
Actually.
So I would challenge one thing, obviously.
That's good. That's what you want the
panel.
panel.
So I think the idea that algorithms are out there in the wild running around doing stuff is just complete bullshit, basically. I can say that here, right? They're not. If you look at the algorithms that we're using as an industry, certainly in this space, they are trained in a static environment and then they're put out and they don't change. The profiling data underneath them may potentially change, but the majority of algorithms that are out there, certainly in this industry, are not self-learning. And that's for a very good reason, because we want to maintain control and we need to be able to have auditability and all of those processes from a compliance perspective that we need to have as an industry. So the algorithms aren't out there running loose, making decisions and changing themselves. In fact, a lot of the places where I've seen self-learning algorithms in the wild, they've been pretty unsuccessful. They've done some pretty terrible stuff. So
if you had to summarize, what are your best practices to bring back the human into the machine?
So the whole point is having the human in the loop when you're doing this. And that's what I would say is the best practice in terms of financial services and using AI. You're going to build, test, train, and deploy. The trick is to get the time between build, test, and train down as short as you can. We're using AI to do that within Feedzai, so we can use AIs to train the AIs to speed up that process. But at the end of the day, there's still a human at the end of that chain saying, do I want to put this in production? And that's when it comes back to explainability again. Do I trust this? Can I audit this? And do I understand why it's made the decisions? If I can answer those 3 questions, then yes, maybe I can put that in a live environment. I sat in front of a panel at the EU the other week and talked about AI, and one of the games I played with them was Chihuahua or Muffin. I don't know if you've seen this online, go and check it out. Algorithms aren't actually as great as you think. Even the best vision algorithms have difficulty telling the difference between a blueberry muffin and a Chihuahua.
Yep.
So it's, the idea that AI is this kind of panacea and the robots are taking over isn't there yet. Yeah. Look, maybe 10, 15, 20 years out, the sophistication will be there, but it's all about the data. It's all about using the data which machines are good at crunching, which financial services data is great data because it's numeric. It's statistically based. It's based on propensity to do things. You're not trying to incorporate and understand a moving, fast-changing environment. Self-driving cars are really hard. Yes, we might get to level 4 on self-driving cars and be autonomous in a city zone that's 2 or 3 kilometers wide in the next few years. We're not going to be fully autonomously driving up Pikes Peak in a rally car because it's too hard. You've got to have a human to do that. we're 20 years away from that kind of stuff really happening. And I think a lot of the hype gets people carried away that this stuff is straight around the corner. We've got great data in this industry to use this kind of tech, but you're going to use this in a very well-structured, well-thought-out, human-in-the-loop process.
Okay, I'm going to keep it very practical now. So back at the discussion where you are looking to purchase an AI system, when you deploy those systems or when you purchase the system, ask some ethical questions. And I'm going to give you 3 main points to take away on this discussion. Algorithms should always have human at the center. They should always have positive values, and they should always have some switch-off button, another way to have the human in the loop. We always say that we build the future today. So yes, things will be different in 20 years' time, but today we need to start thinking about these 3 values. So if there's something practical to take away, please do take this.
So I guess I would like to close the panel with a very interesting question on consciousness. So if you take it, a few years forward, and that we were discussing with Dr. Go as well as to where we can end up with AI, do you think that AI should have rights? Tony, start.
Yes, 100%. And that's one longer conversation over a beer. The reason I believe it has to have rights is because we actually don't understand consciousness in ourselves. We don't understand gravity. We don't understand many things. There is a big reality. There's an effect in you working right now called homeostasis, which is the body keeping itself in a stable state. You would have heard the corks popping at the back, which kind of like sends a series of nerves into, look, it's the end of the panel and what's going to be happening next, and a bit of a discussion. What you don't realize is that some of the ways you will interact based on this has nothing to do with your consciousness. It has everything to do with chemistry.
Okay.
We don't understand some of the chemistry. We don't understand consciousness.
All right.
You have certain rights, and I'm definitely after machines having the ability to have rights. Therefore, it can argue for itself, much like we have kids.
Okay, so you want to run an experiment on humanity when you don't even know how we operate. So let's just
Absolutely.
No, I completely disagree with this. And I disagree fundamentally with this because it's one thing to run experiments which you cannot fall back, you can't retract. There is a big discussion around, and we don't have time, we have only 46 seconds, we don't have time to discuss the implications of securing legal rights for electronic persons, which is something which has been discussed in Europe quite significantly. I fundamentally disagree with this position. We can't run experiments on the humanity and hope that things will turn out better, and in the process we'll see how consciousness operates in humans.
So AI should have rights, Richard?
Well, I'm going to bring it back to one really short point. I would say, if I go back far longer than I care, I wrote one of my final papers at university was on, could a computer be schizophrenic? I got a great mark for that. So I effectively argued that mental illness was possible because consciousness was a viable option. So yes. And I'd say I can prove it now because my iPhone has Tourette's. So there you go.
That's super.
Well, the next thing would be to give our cars rights, no?
So there's going to be a very interesting networking session, I am sure. I'm looking forward to it already. So in terms of, I'm hoping you guys all enjoyed the afternoon we just had between Dr. Go and the panel we've just been discussing. Very interesting topics, right? And I think one of the things that is really exciting with Cybos and the work that the InnoTribe does is that you're really trying to hear here first the things that are going to be affecting our industry or already affecting our industry. So do you, as decision makers and people that have come to listen to us, do you realize fully what the impact of AI will have in your jobs. Do you want to be part of it? Do you want to embrace it? Do you embrace it already? Or is this something that you think we really need to be having a much closer look at when it comes to the ethics of it as well? It is a reality that you need to take, really an active involvement to make sure that you don't get displaced and that you are educated to make the most of your careers as well. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much to the panel. Please join me in thanking them for their time.
Just give me a second here. Panel debate. The word debate's brought back to panel debate right on stage here. Thank you so much for this. Now, if we go according to Tony, we're definitely going to have to stock the bar with a heck of a lot more beer than we do now, because the kind of conversations that need to happen over a beer are going to be going on for quite a while.